And joining us now as we talk about a relatively cold weather forecast here for the week ahead across the U.S., some ice thrown in there as well in some parts of the country. We welcome in our good friend Eric Snodgrass with Nutrient. And Eric, good to have you on the show again this week, sir. And as I mentioned, a lot of folks really bundling up to start the week off across much of the country. Wind chill warnings, advisories out. Plus, then you throw in an ice storm across parts of the southern plains. So, very active start to the week when it comes to the weather in the U.S. here, Eric.
Yeah, the same shallow Arctic air mass that's dropped those temperatures throughout parts of the plains down to the minus 20s today is actually undercutting some really warm moist air that's from the Gulf, right? So you get this sandwiched effect where you've got the shallow Arctic air here, but then there's above freezing air above it. So the precip falls through that warm layer and it's all liquid. And then the moment it gets in the last, I don't know, 1,000 feet as it falls toward their surface, the temperatures there are sub-freezing, and as a result, you end up getting some of your liquid super cooling. It doesn't turn back into ice; it super cools, and then the moment it touches something that's frozen, that has a temperature below freezing, it turns into glaze on top of it, and that's going to stretch from Texas and parts of southern Oklahoma. Arkansas has got an ice storm warning out today, and this actually moves into where you're from, right over there in parts of western Tennessee. That whole area is going to be the lookout for some ice accumulation as well. So nasty setup here, but to be honest, that's where all the action is going to be for the next probably 10 days. Much of the upper Midwest, the northern plains, much of the Midwest, we got a drier outlook for most of the next 10 days. Doesn't mean there won't be anything coming through, but a drier outlook, not a whole lot of snow expected at this point, at least for the next 7+ days for those areas. And again, it comes back to something I've been worried about. I put this in a report last week. The soil moisture down about 40 inches throughout most of the Corn Belt still shows last fall's drought still there, which means we're going to have to wait on spring to really undo what last fall did to us. I want to say that kind of went, I don't know, I'd say by me a little bit. I thought that things were returning and we are getting better moisture, but that deep profile moisture issue is something I think a lot of folks are going to have to think about, because the South's going to be soaked, but the northern part of the midsection to the northern part of the country, not so much.
Well, you mentioned that, and we are getting ready to turn the calendar to February. I know we have Groundhog Day coming up as well. That's always a fun weather outlook day. But thinking about that drought picture, Eric, looking into February, you mentioned might take spring to get us some moisture. What's that February outlook? What's that shaping up and looking like here as you look at things right now?
Yeah, well, Groundhog's a great holiday, right? I use it as an excuse to watch the Bill Murray movie, Groundhog Day. Just this fun movie.
Mhm.
Uh, but just a quick reminder that Groundhog's statistical performance is below 38% historically. So we just need to take it as a holiday. I have people, believe it or not, that email me and call me and want to compare forecasts from like NOAA or from the European model, even my forecast, but they'll say, but the groundhog said, I'm like, you understand that that's a gimmick, right? But anyway, but this idea about February, this one's going to be interesting. If you had asked me 2-3 weeks ago, I would have said, I think February's got better chances of seeing more of what we just saw this week, setting up shots at colder air than otherwise. But things have changed for me. And the reason they've changed is that even though La Nina is fading quickly. I mean, it is fading. We're getting this pattern setting up such that we just keep reinforcing what we call the Southeast Ridge. That's a big area of high pressure that sits over like Cuba to Florida. I mean, we should call it like the Bermuda Triangle Ridge. I don't know, but it's sitting there, and it's going to keep much of the eastern half of the country with better chances of more mild air through February. So I wonder if the groundhog's going to pick up on this or get a little hint from the CPC or from my forecast that says, hey, man, it looks like maybe some folks are going to feel a little bit of an early spring because of this setup. Overall, though, thinking about spring, like February and beyond, that could set up a very active Ohio River Valley from your backyard to my backyard here. You're in, parts of the Mid-South. I'm up in the middle of the Corn Belt to the east of us. The Ohio River Valley could be very, very wet. But you asked about drought. I don't like how this pattern sets up for the plains. Even though the plains have had better moisture as of late, there's a lot more that's needed to correct the longstanding issues there. And it's just the wrong setup, which means we may be waiting until the end of February, into March or April, to see some relief for the plains. But again, that's so far out, we can't say anything with confidence about whether or not that drought will get broken in that area.
Well, Eric, I know as well, market moving weather is South America right now to start off the week. I know we had some rains over the weekend, maybe not as what was forecasted. Drought concerns and that longer range forecast, it sounds like, again for Argentina. And we do have harvest delays in Brazil as well. So catch us up on the latest. What are you seeing with South America right now?
Yeah, I was talking to a couple of my good friends last week about that. One, Arlen Suderman, the guy, also a guy named Darren Fry. We were just discussing why the harvest progress wasn't what I expected in Mato Grosso, and he said the crop's just green. Problem is, you get all that rain, even though you planted it early, it just stays green. It didn't have a chance to dry down, so that's what some of the delays are, at least based on our assumptions. So that's in Mato Grosso. Big rains in central Brazil the next 7 to 10 days. That's going to push that crop even bigger. But as you said, the market movement here was that last week, when all those 2-week preset maps come out, they included in it the rain from this past weekend for Argentina. That's all gone now. And now the revelation that the next couple of weeks can be very dry and also hot, maybe 5 to 10 degrees Celsius above normal in midsummer, means that Argentina is going to quickly run out of the rain that it just had come through with high evaporation rates. So now we're talking again about Argentinian drought, even though from about Jan 16 through about the 28th, 29th, there was plenty of rainfall across Argentina's main growing areas. And by the way, some big hail. Saw some videos this weekend of some of the storms throwing out some large hail into Argentina. But the news story is going to be the resurgence of drought there.
Well, thinking as well before we wrap up, Eric, any other thoughts weather wise you want to share with us? Anything you're watching in South America, US, or around the globe?
Well, I'll take you around the globe real fast, and I want to take you all the way around it over to Australia and New Zealand. I'm not sure if you heard in the news, but massive flooding in Auckland over the last several days here. Some places picking up like more than a half a year's worth of rainfall in a couple of days. Tons of flooding video out for that particular thing, but that hit one of the major metro areas in New Zealand. But much of this summer for Australia has been cold in a lot of places at times and very wet as well. That will all change. That will all change as this El Nino builds its way in the next 6 to 9 months. And the Australians are probably the first, and they're paying the most attention to it more than any other place on the face of the earth. So over there, that side of the equator and the southern hemisphere, I think that's where a lot of the action's been.
Well, you could sign up for Eric's daily weather newsletter on our website, markettalkag.com. And we appreciate the time as always with that. Eric Snodgrass of Nutrien. Thanks so much, sir. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next
Yeah,
week.
you bet. We'll talk then.